On a deep winter's night, the doorbell rang. Upon answering, a police officer stood there. The officer said,
"We found your child hiding on your balcony, so she is under our protection."
I was confused because my only daughter was sleeping with me and I had no idea what he was talking about. The girl the officer brought looked around 5 years old. Her lips were blue, and she seemed to be shivering uncontrollably. I told him, "My daughter is with me, that's not my daughter." Despite my explanation, the officer looked at me with suspicion, suggesting that the girl should be taken to the hospital. The child's hair was long, looking like she had never had a haircut, and she appeared not to have bathed for some time. Her clothes were dirty and torn, clearly unwashed. By her looks, she seemed to be about the same age as my daughter, but she was much skinnier compared to her. "Whose daughter is she? Why was she hiding on our balcony?" At that point, I couldn't predict the turmoil this child would cause. "My name is Emily, 32 years old. I work as an office worker while raising my child. I live with my husband Tom, who was my classmate in high school, and our 5-year-old daughter Emma, in a condo my parents bought for us on the first floor. My husband works for a company, often traveling for business, and helping his colleagues even on weekends, so he's frequently away from home. On a winter day, when my husband was on business trip and I was home alone with my daughter, the doorbell rang. I wondered who could be ringing the bell at such a late hour and checked the intercom camera to find a police officer standing there. When I opened the door, the officer said, "We found your child hiding on your balcony, so she is under our protection." I was baffled by what the officer was saying. "Huh? My daughter is sleeping inside the house."
"Excuse me?"
The officer seemed surprised, but I was even more shocked. Apparently, the girl has sneaked into our balcony without me noticing while I was asleep. The girl the officer had with him was around 5 years old, with blue lips. It was deep in the night, cold enough for snow, and she was shivering uncontrollably. I repeated, "My daughter is with me. That's not my daughter." But the officer kept looking at me suspiciously and said the girl needed to be taken to the hospital. Seeing the little girl in the cold winter night made me feel so sorry for her. I wrapped her with a warm blanket I fetched from inside the house. Her small hands felt cold, perhaps not from the cold but from fear or sorrow. She held back her tears, not making a sound, and bit her lip. Her hair looked unkempt, and her clothes were dirty and ragged. She seemed to be about the same age as my daughter, but she looked malnourished and was very skinny compared to her. I thought, whose daughter is she? Why was she hiding on our balcony? Seeing a child about the same age as my daughter in such a pitiful state broke my heart, and I was puzzled as to why she was here. The image of the young girl wouldn't leave my mind, and I couldn't sleep all night. Then I received a call from my husband, who was on a business trip.
"Was everything okay while I was away on business?"
"Something shocking happened. An unknown girl was hiding on our balcony last night. The police took her and she was taken to the hospital."
"Why didn't you let her in?"
"I can't just let an unknown child into our home."
"You should have let that small girl into the house instead of handing her to the police. She must have been so scared." I was puzzled by my husband's sudden anger. How did he know she was a small child? I hadn't told him that. I asked him, but he seemed evasive in his responses. "Actually, that girl is the child of someone I know. Her mother was not around and I felt sorry for her. I thought you could take care of her, so I brought her over yesterday."
"Wait, weren't you on a business trip? If you had told me what was going on, I would have let her in." Tom deeply regretted leaving the little child on the balcony on that cold day. But I couldn't forgive that act. Even if he dressed the child warmly, there was a risk of the child freezing. If you're not on a business trip, where have you been and what have you been doing? My husband said he was searching for the little girl's mother, but I felt he was hiding something. After his trip, for some reason, he picked up the girl from the police and entrusted her to me. I didn't ask why, but I was worried that something was amiss. Have you found her mother? By the way, who's her father? Where is he?
I haven't found her yet. As for her father...
You said she's someone you know. Who is it? What kind of acquaintance?
It's just a casual acquaintance. It's not a deep relationship, so that's enough. I'll be on another business trip for a while, so please, take care of her.
Where are you going? Wait, what do you mean, just take care of her? My husband brushed off my objections, left the girl behind, and departed. I felt something was off about him, so I searched his belongings and found something in the inner pocket of his suit. I was shocked by the note I found in my husband's suit. I immediately tried to call him, but couldn't reach him. Then I noticed my daughter Emma and the little girl looking at me anxiously. Can you tell me your name, young lady?
It's Catherine.
Hearing Catherine's quiet reply, I then asked her age. Catherine told me she was also 5, the same age as my daughter. When I smiled gently, Catherine looked surprised and then grinned back. After that, she seemed to get hungry and held her stomach. Are you hungry?
Yeah.
When I prepared hot dogs for my daughter and Catherine, they watched with great interest. Once I offered those to them, they began eating immediately. Catherine ate so quickly that ketchup smeared all over her mouth. When I reached out with a tissue to wipe her mouth, Catherine suddenly shielded her head with both hands, as if protecting herself. I felt uneasy seeing this gesture. Don't worry, I'm just going to clean your mouth. When I spoke to her gently, Catherine turned to me, looking relieved. I wiped the ketchup off her face, and she resumed eating her hot dog. After the meal, Catherine seemed satisfied with a full stomach, but now I had to clean her dirty body. I prepared for a shower and began to undress Catherine. To my shock, I saw numerous bruises all over her body. The sight made me think she might have been hit or pinched by someone. Despite my concern, I tried to maintain a cheerful demeanor. As I was about to wash her, Catherine said,
It's okay, I can wash myself.
To my surprise, she began taking a shower with cold water. What are you doing? That's just cold water.
This is how we always do it at home.
Why with cold water? Always? Catherine nodded and was about to bathe in the water when I quickly stopped her and washed her thoroughly with soap. Afterward, as she took a hot shower, Catherine murmured,
It's warm,
and smiled happily. After the shower, Catherine shared that she rarely bathed at home, and when she did, her mother would tell her to wash with water. The thought that she considered this normal made my heart ache. After the shower, I dressed Catherine in my daughter's clothes and neatly arranged her hair. She looked completely transformed. My daughter and Catherine looked so much alike, almost like sisters. Observing them, I felt a warming smile, noticing how Emma and Catherine shared a somewhat similar aura. It was evident that Catherine, a very obedient and quiet girl, was starving for a mother's love. She would quietly approach me while I was cooking, gently tugging at the hem of my skirt in a playful mischief, giving sweet smiles and holding my hand tightly while sleeping. Emma also adored Catherine very much, and the two became closer, appearing like real sisters to anyone who saw them. A week had passed, but I had yet to receive any contact from my husband, Tom, and was worried beyond words. Tom had mentioned that he knew Catherine's mother, but that wasn't reason enough to keep looking after a small child indefinitely. Being unable to contact Tom, I thought about what lay ahead for Catherine and consulted the police. With the police's assistance, Catherine was placed into protective custody in a facility. Watching Catherine, tears streaming from her big eyes, repeatedly looking back at me as she was led away by facility staff, a painful feeling spread through my chest. 9 years passed, and I was living with my parents, my daughter Emma, and Catherine at our family home. In fact, after initially placing Catherine in the facility, we had adopted her and brought her to our family home. My parents warmly welcomed Catherine, who had come to us by fate, treating her like their true grandchild. The two girls grew up beautifully as sisters, and Emma and Catherine even fulfilled their dreams of becoming models, recently becoming popular enough to appear in magazines as beautiful sister models. Stepping into the glamorous world, they pursued further success, radiating lively smiles. One day the intercom of my family home rang, and when I opened the front door, I saw Tom, looking ragged, standing there with an unknown woman who introduced herself as Karen. To avoid being seen by the neighbors, I invited them inside, where sitting on the living room sofa, they suddenly began to speak.
Catherine is my child.
Tom, who had cut off contact for 9 years, appeared suddenly, not apologizing, and these were his first words. I was so astounded that I couldn't say anything. I thought so. The two of them do look like sisters. Is the mother this lady Karen next to you? In response to my question, Tom awkwardly began recounting his encounter with Karen. Karen used to work at a tavern frequented by Tom, and even after knowing he was married, they became close, and shortly after, Catherine was born. Indecisive, Tom struggled to bring up the topic of divorce with me. Consequently, Karen grew tired of child rearing and abandoned it. Desperate, Tom thought of letting me raise the child. It's such a self-serving story, but the surprises didn't end there.
So I have a favor to ask. Can you give Catherine back to me?
Tom suddenly stood up from the sofa and, begging me with tears in his eyes, made an unbelievable request. Do you even realize what you're saying?
I accidentally saw Catherine in a magazine and I was shocked. She's become so successful.
So what? Thinking of playing the mother now after all this time?
I'm Catherine's real mother. It has nothing to do with you.
You've ignored Catherine all this while. It's irresponsible. You haven't acted like a mother at all. While we were exchanging words, Tom now clung to my leg, pleading with a pitiful look.
We don't have money now. Please, I beg you, give Catherine back to us.
I refuse outright. How dare you count on Catherine's earnings? Disgusting.
You're the disgusting one. Aren't you living off the money earned by Catherine and Emma?
How rude. All the money the two of them earned is being saved. Catherine is my daughter, and I have no intention of handing her over to people like you. Suddenly Karen stood up from the sofa and tried to strike me. Her demeanor seemed devoid of reason, and I felt fear.
Stop it! What are you doing to Mama?
With that, Catherine suddenly appeared. She stood in front of me, arms spread wide in protection, glaring at Karen.
Catherine, you've grown up so beautifully. I'm your mom, remember? Let's go home together. You're not my mom. I don't know you. Leave my house.
Catherine nestled into my arms and began to cry loudly. It seems she faintly remembers the pain Karen inflicted on her during her childhood.
Catherine, that's a misunderstanding. You were just a little child back then.
While thinking it pointless for Karen to make such excuses now, I showed her a memo and photo I found in Tom's suit 9 years ago. The memo read, I hate raising a child. I can't love my daughter. If Tom doesn't marry me, I'll abandon Catherine, and we'll run away together. The picture showed a young Catherine covered in bruises, accompanied by a doctor's report. And you still consider yourself her mother?
Why do you have that? It wasn't my fault. Tom did all that on his own. I was too young to raise a child back then, but as her mother, I'm taking Catherine back.
Catherine and I have been legally adopted, so by law I'm her mother. You can't just take her back. Mentioning the law seemed to render Karen speechless. Tom, still not ready to give up, pitched another idea.
All right, Emily, let's do this. I'll break up with Karen and let's restart as a couple. After all, Catherine and Emma are my kids. That should solve the problem, right?
Restart with her? You're going to dump me? What are you saying?
Hearing their conversation, I felt too exhausted to be angry. I wanted nothing more to do with these kinds of people. Tom, we can't just start over, unfortunately.
Why can't we start over? What do you mean?
I searched for you for 3 years but couldn't find you. As a result, the court granted me a divorce.
A divorce was finalized? What are you talking about?
Just as Tom reached out towards me, the sound of police sirens filled the air. My parents had called the police after seeing Karen's attempt to attack me. The police are here. Go home and never show your face here again.
I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Forget about Catherine. Just lend me some money.
Tom and Karen, showing their disgraceful sides to the end, were taken away by the police. We plan to get child support from Tom and Karen. It's clear they'll face difficulties as they're ostracized by relatives and acquaintances. Despite all that has happened, the little girl who once cowered in fear has grown strong. Looking forward to a bright future filled with dreams, I plan to live happily with my daughters and parents.